looks like we're getting a fairly good turnout, so that's good.
That's great. How many people do we have on the call? Can we?
I got 20 so far.
Okay, great.
21 now.
Okay, well, we can give people a couple more minutes to log in, but a minute or two.
Good afternoon. This is Chief McKnight. I just logged in.
Thanks, Chief.
I'd have my video on, but I'm in painting clothes. I got a project going on at my house right now, so you guys might hear some saws in the background.
Hey, Michael Langley. Just wanted to check in with you about a favor I was going to ask of you, if you wanted to perhaps provide us for an opening prayer.
Oh man, I'm probably not the best choice for the opening prayer.
Well, I was checking to see if we had somebody else here. I know Leslie's with us. This was my job to do before the meeting, but here I am.
Annie, this is Lou Han. If you want me to, I can open with a.
That'd be a great thing, Major. Thank you.
I was gonna say I could do it, but my prayers are different than most people are used to. So it's really just about thanks. So it'd probably be better if somebody else did.
We all pray in our own way, so that's great. Thanks again, Michael and Major. So, by my count, we currently have 26 people present. It's a great turnout, and I'm sure others will drop in, and some may have to drop out. I know some people have time constraints, but for the purposes of getting us started, let me just introduce myself. Danny Santos, Interim Director of the Legislative Commission on Indian Services. And it's been great for me to team up with Brian Detman and Melissa Gallardo and Adrian about putting this public safety cluster meeting back in a meeting mode. It's been about over a year now since the December 2nd, 2019 cluster meeting that was out at Pendleton or Umatilla. So it's just great to have the group back in. I think COVID and all kinds of other things put us on a little bit off our schedule, but it's so good to get this reactivated and hopefully moving forward into the future. We have a fairly full agenda, so we probably should get started with that. And Major Lujan, if you would please open us up with a prayer, that would be great.
Thank you. Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business, guide our hearts, our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities, so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today.
Great. Thank you so much, Major. And we certainly do need the good spirits helping us as we want to move forward as a state and as tribal nations. So thank you very much for your inspiration there. For introductions, I have my screen set up, but let me just go down our list of participants by agency and by tribe, and then I'll ask those participating from those state agencies to introduce themselves, and then I'll go on to the next agency and the next tribe. So I'll start off with Youth Development Division.
Hello, those gathered and brought together. Really appreciate everybody. I'm Brian Detman, the Youth Development Division Director. My predecessor, Serena Stoudemire-Wesley, was the co-chair of this cluster, and I've come into her role in this past summer and was really committed to continuing the great work that's happening, and so have agreed to co-facilitate the meeting along with Danny. I'm excited about it sounds like we've got some new co-chairs. I'll just quickly mention I've got a couple of my YDD colleagues, Melissa Gallardo, who's helped a lot with Adrian in getting this meeting together, and also Anya Sakino, who can wave, who's also our juvenile crime prevention manager and has worked for many years on crime prevention, in particular in partnership with many tribes. So appreciate the YDD participation.
Great. Thank you all. Department of Corrections, I'm not sure if I saw Daryl on there or not. Okay. State Police, Superintendent Davey, I know you're at least you're logged on. Do you want to introduce yourselves, and then Major Lujan?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here. My name is Terry Davey. I'm the Superintendent of State Police. And with me today, I do know that Major Joel Lujan and also Lieutenant Cord Wood are also on this important call.
Great. Thank you so much. Emergency Management.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity here today, at least virtually. My name is Andrew Phelps, and I'm the Director of the Oregon Office of Emergency Management. And Eric Rao, our Tribal Liaison, is also with us.
Thanks again. OLCC, Kelly, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Rout. I'm with the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. Nice to see you all today.
Good to see you. And I'm not sure if we have anybody from DPSST, but let me know.
Hi, Jim DeSoli. I'm with DPSST. Les Holman and Lindsay Hale weren't able to make the meeting today because of budget hearings. But I'm the regional training manager here at the Academy, and they've asked me to step in and in their place. Appreciate
Great. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.
OYA.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Leslie Riggs. I'm a Grand Ronde tribal member. I'm the tribal liaison for Oregon Youth Authority. And my good friend and counterpart, Derwin Decker is here as the Native American Services Coordinator as well. I don't know if he wants to say hello. Good to see everyone.
Great to see you, Leslie. Thanks for participating.
Hello, I'm Derwin Medicine Bear Decker. Like Leslie was saying, I'm the Native American Services Coordinator. I'm a MODOC enrolled Klamath. I'm stationed at the McLaren facility up in Woodburn.
Great. Glad you're on board today. Department of Justice, Karen, I saw you on.
Yes, and now I am off mute. Good afternoon, Karen Clevering, Oregon Department of Justice, Tribal Liaison. Good to see you all.
Great. Constantine, well, the governor's office, I don't know if Constantine is on yet. He indicated that he'll be joining us for part of our presentation today, but it will be in and out of the meeting. So And I know that the U.S. Attorney's Office for Oregon, Tim.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tim Simmons from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and glad to be with everyone.
Great, thanks, Tim. And thanks to all our federal colleagues. From the tribal side, Burns Paiute, is there any member here? We reached out to, but let me see if any Burns Paiute members are here. Hearing none. CT Clusi. I know Chair Bosley was hopeful to join us, but I'm not sure she was able to make it. Okay, Grand Ron, Chief McKnight, I know you're on here.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Jake McKnight. I'm the Chief of Police with the Grand Ronde Tribal Police Department. I really appreciate everyone getting together today and getting this cluster meetings going again. And I look forward to the future meetings.
Great, thanks, Chief. I'm not sure if there's any other Grand Ronde members on, but.
Well, Danny, I'll go ahead.
Hi, Michael, sorry.
Since I'm on tribal council at Grand Ronde, but I also noticed that Brooks Wakeland is here and I see his name, and I'd be remiss to not mention my cousin Leslie Riggs, even though he's introduced himself. So for me, I've got cousins on here, and
there you go.
Nice to see.
It's a family affair. So.
Thank you, Michael. As he stated, I'm Brooks Wakeland. I work in the attorney's office here with Grand Ronde, and I work with the police department. So thank you all for having me today.
Thank you, Brooks. Cow Creek. Okay. Coquel.
Hello there. If you can hear me, I'm Jerry Merritt, the new police chief for the Coquels, and I just started about a couple months ago. I'm taking Scott Lefevre's place, who decided to retire. I don't know why, probably because he's been here too long. But I'm looking forward to working with all of you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for joining us. Umatilla. Okay. Hearing none. Klamath.
Hi, everybody. My name is Willa Palace, and I'm on the Klamath Tribal Council, and I'm also the Tribal Council liaison for our public safety department that we are developing. And I don't think, normally I think George Lopez, our general manager, participates, but he's on leave for a couple of weeks, so I jumped.
Well, thank you for joining us. Siletz.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bud Lane. I'm Vice Chairman of the Siletz Tribal Council. It's good to be here with all of you.
Bud, it's always great to see you. Thank you. Warm Springs, Chair Tasumti.
Yes, Raymond Tasumti, Chairman of Warm Springs Tribal Council.
And I didn't see any other members, but maybe there are other Warm Spring members.
Just Bill Elliott, Chief of Police for the Warm Springs Tribal Police Department.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, I'm not sure if we had the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Enforcement Office. Okay. Did we miss somebody? Did I miss somebody?
Danny, I'm just going to chime in and let you know that I've heard from one member here today who is not able to unmute. So I'm looking into that to see if that's something I have any control over.
Good afternoon. My name is Anita Jackson. I'm from the Warm Springs Tribal Council. I'm a former public safety general manager and former chief judge.
Councilmember Jackson, thank you. And sorry I missed introducing you there.
I'm Elizabeth Madden. I'm with the I'm working with the Siletz Tribe. I'm the new prevention coordinator. I work with the youth here, the tribal youth. So pretty new to this position, but glad to be here today.
Well, you're right on time to catch up with the rest of us. So
awesome.
Great, thank you. Any others who haven't been introduced yet? besides the unmuted person. Okay, Brian, I'll turn it over to you on the next agenda item. I should note, and I failed to do this at the get-go, for purposes of sharing this, not just amongst ourselves, but for others who may not be able to attend, this session is being recorded, and I should have let you know that from the get-go. And it will also be helpful for us to share with those who haven't been able to, or weren't able to attend, and also for helping us with our minutes. So I just wanted to let you know that the session is being recorded. Brian, you want to take it from there?
Sure, Danny. I will. Just want to do some quick housekeeping pieces. Frankly, one, and I think the primary one is just to quickly talk about the minutes from the last. I believe at this point Melissa is going to share her screen, so we can put the minutes up. Thank you, Melissa. Yep, here we go. So I think we can post-meeting share these with attendees. So don't worry about having to, if you're just seeing this now for the first time or you didn't get a chance to look at it in advance, no worries. We'll get it sent out again. But that meeting, as Danny mentioned, was about a year, a little more than a year, frankly, a year and a couple months ago, and we were able to meet in person. And though I wasn't a part of the meeting, it does feel like a whole different set of circumstances that we're faced with now. So you see the list of attendees at the meeting, both from tribal governments and also agency folks as well. So if you'll scroll down a little bit, Melissa, thanks. And I'll not really read this stuff to you. I'll just went into tribal reports and I think had some good robust reports from different tribes. One of the things I'll just highlight for folks, and it's on our agenda for later today, is this topic of missing and murdered Native American women. That's a topic that we want to talk a little bit more about in this meeting. So there was some discussion of that at that meeting, which my guess is obviously a key issue and something folks are looking forward to diving into more deeply. So if you'll scroll down, Melissa, I think we're continuing just with some different reports and pieces on and data. I'm gonna, there's some discussion of some tribal of different bills. Obviously, there may be some importance to legislative bills this time around. So having Constantine attend and give a quick overview or be able to answer some questions, at least from the governor's office perspective, will be helpful. And maybe there's some other policy issues that need to be discussed today. For the Public Law 280 tribes, there was some discussion about that topic. It's also, again, on our agenda today. Youth Development Division was part of organizing a PL 280 conference/training. And so we were excited to do that in collaboration with, I think, partners at Grand Ronde and probably others. So that is a topic that we can talk about a little bit later about whether or not there's whether we should do another one of those statewide, state and tribal trainings for the relevant tribes. Moving down a little bit more, I think we're gonna get to some, keep going, Melissa, I think we get to some agency reports that, and again, for those agents, we'll do that again briefly at the end of today's meeting if we have time. So the agency representatives can talk a little bit about their work. Obviously spent some time on that more than a year ago, some discussion about SB 1080, which is, an interest, kind of I think relates to some measure 11 changes that were happening. So moving through, I think you'll, Anya is here again today. So if we get to any agency updates, we're happy to talk about some of the some of the work we're doing at the Youth Development Division and the grant making that we do, a big piece of which is directed towards tribes. So appreciate that partnership. And then moving down, I think, again, more agency reports. And then I think we're going to get into, toward the bottom here, just some key topics and issues that were discussed at the meeting. I'm going to actually ask Melissa to pause. Were there any questions or comments, just for those who may have had a chance to look at the minutes beforehand, or just questions on things that you kind of saw as Melissa was breezing through those?
I did, Brian. This is Kelly from OLCC. Only that when I was reviewing the minutes, I recall from that meeting, which seems so long ago for many reasons, that Serena had asked, for the next meeting, which was supposed to be March 2020, to provide a presentation about, cannabis regulation, which I was happy to do, but that obviously didn't happen. And so this might be potentially just a topic for future meetings, but if there's an interest, I'd be happy at a future meeting to provide an update or presentation on cannabis regulation in Oregon.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. I don't know if there are other comments, but we'll record that as a point, obviously in our notes and minutes. And I think we've got there's kind of that list of potential topics, and we should add that for consideration. So thanks, Kelly. Any other questions or comments as we go through the minutes?
Brian, I just have a clarifying question. I believe, so we had a public safety cluster meeting in May, correct? And I just wasn't sure, I can't honestly remember, maybe we weren't able to review the minutes, but I just went back on my calendar because we did have a meeting in May. Is that, just to confirm, I did not dream that.
Great question. I guess I'd ask others on the phone, or sorry, on the Zoom call here to confirm. I think there was one that was potentially scheduled for March. Maybe that got pushed to May, but we only found minutes for that December meeting. So
okay,
if that did indeed happen among a group, it'd be great to know. We weren't able to.
Karen, I will note that yesterday was Groundhog Day, so maybe this is repeating itself. So, but no, I couldn't find records of a May meeting. That there may have been I don't know, but we just couldn't find any records of a May meeting.
Yeah. Anybody else attend that meeting?
I think it was supposed to happen, but it did not, unless it happened outside of my knowledge.
Okay. Thanks, Anya. Karen, I don't know.
Sorry, this is Kelly again. I was just scrolling through my calendar and I think there was one. It was like an hour in May. I have something on my calendar that says sound vaguely familiar being on Zoom, but it was very short.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe it was just a quick check-in. We're happy to dig around a little bit, and that there was a gathering is a good thing. And if it was just a chance to see folks and check in at that stage of the pandemic and everything else going on. But if there are things that come up as we scroll through the minutes here, or other updates, let's be sure to try to capture those. So I'm going to keep moving us forward because we'll have some more time, I think, later in the agenda to kind of get into some of the agenda items. So Melissa, if you'll just scroll down, we'll just, so folks, we're doing this quickly, but you'll see a little more information here about kind of updates and presentations. Talked about, I think, presentation around fire and the fire marshal, and as it relates to BIA lands. So that was, it sounds like an important conversation coming off the last summer, and as we all know, a conversation to continue into given this past summer. We talked about PL 280 a bit, So I think we're coming up on the end. I think it's 7 and 8. I think it's blank. So just a quick revisit. I think we've tried to carry forward as many of the key either questions or topics that needed more conversation into this agenda. So we can spend some time on that here in a little bit after we actually do a couple other agenda items, roundtable and the report from the LCIS. But any other questions or comments on the minutes?
Yeah, this is Raymond Tesumte, Warm Springs. On page 7, where it states Columbia River Interjurisdictional Compact predated PL 280. I'd like to have a little bit more insight on that. I think that PL 280 was enacted in 1953. And Warm Springs, Red Lake, and Menominee were the only 3 that was exempted from Public Law 280. And Columbia River, as I understand it, was initiated in the mid-70s. Just a comment.
No, appreciate. So we appreciate that. Thank you. And we can. I'm not looking at I'll go down to page 7. But if there's something we should fix or adjust, or at least just provide a little more context, we can amend as needed. Danny, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I just think thank you, Chair Tesumte. We'll check into that comment in the minutes and we'll get it clarified and straightened out so we can report back to you, Chair Tesumte, and to the cluster. So we'll figure it out.
Yes, thanks for that. All right, I'm going to move us forward just so we can keep going. Next on the agenda is Tribal Roundtable and updates. So I didn't track all the tribal attendees. So I wonder, and Dan, I might ask for a little help, or Melissa, just to say who, unless somebody, we can do it kind of popcorn style. If somebody wants to jump in and give an update, that would be great. We've got until about 2 o'clock, a little after, to hear updates. So if it's okay, I'd ask for somebody to self-select, and then we can. And I mean, I'm happy to make sure I'm hearing from folks, but I'd love for somebody to step up and provide an update around their public safety and justice work. Unless I need to call on somebody.
This is Chief McKnight. I'll go ahead and start it as long as one of my elders doesn't want to start.
Thanks, Chief.
Go, Jake.
All right, not hearing anybody, I'll go ahead and start. Just a few things that I've been working on. We started up our reserve program this year. We're really excited about that. We got 1 tribal member that's in the class currently. Hoping the next round that we will get at least 4 to 5 more. We'll see how this first one goes. One of the issues that we're seeing right now is the passing of the 110 bill. Last year in January, we had 50 cases that we pulled in January 2020. And in January 2021, we've already pulled 133 cases. So our caseload's almost tripled. A lot of those are drug-related calls that we're getting within the community. I find it a bit odd that we weren't included in this bill at all, or we didn't have a chance to talk about it, because the PL 280 reservations are going to have a major effect with this bill, and we have no way of controlling it. From the sounds of it, when we send in these, when we cite these people for the violations amounts of methamphetamines and heroin, there's really nothing we can do after that, and it sounds like they're not even going to court after we're sending or writing them those violations. So I can see this being nothing but a major issue in Indian country, and it's kind of bothersome that we weren't included or we didn't get to talk about how that was going to affect us. This year we started our woods outside patrol officer. So we have an officer now that's able to go around, and excuse me once again for the banging in the background. I'm getting carpet and wood floors put down. And we are trying our best to hit all our properties in the area. And so far it's been really tough on us to try to get to every property and deal with the issues that we're running into. But we will work on trying to get that figured out. And that's my update for now.
Chief McKnight, may I ask, this is Danny Santos, is it ballot measure 110 or Senate Bill 110?
Senate bill.
Senate Bill, okay.
Yeah, it's going to be the Senate Bill 110, and that's the decriminalized methamphetamine, or certain amounts. I think it's 2 grams of meth and like 3 grams of heroin. I don't got the numbers in front of me, but it's just basically day after day we're running into issues now. It's they're pretty much smoking their meth and their heroin in the public now. They don't care if they get caught. We don't even have to hardly talk to them about if they have any meth or heroin. They just hand it over now. And it's nonstop. So.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks.
You got us there?
Report out. Who would like to go? Oh, it looks like another maybe Chief Elliott here. I can't see.
Yeah, that's me. Anyways, I wanted to build upon what Chief McKnight said. One thing that we're, again, Warm Springs, because of we're a different jurisdictional set, we're federal, basically, is that as far as 110 goes, we're still going to aggressively prosecute drug cases coming onto or going through the Warm Springs Indian Reservation, because just even having a minimal amount of drugs flowing into our system is disruptive, and it leads to potentials like domestic violence cases, child abuse cases, all kinds of things are related to that little bit of 2 meths or 2 grams of heroin. So we're going to aggressively use our tribal jurisdiction in order to interdict the drugs coming through or onto the reservation. And then we're also working with Tim Simmons in the U.S. Attorney's Office to use our federal citation authorities to cite those people that are in possession of those drugs if they're non-Indians in the federal magistrate court. So there is a methodology for attacking that problem as it comes to Indian land and our own sovereignty. But like with Chief McKnight, the only thing that we ask is that we be part of the conversation when they start discussing it. Because again, non-Indian jurisdiction is non-Indian's business. But if it overlaps or affects tribal lands, then we kind of want to be involved with the conversation. So I know there's going to be a review process with this opening up of a kind of a Amsterdam type environment in Oregon. When it comes time to review what's going on, we definitely want to be part of that conversation.
Appreciate that. Thanks. Additional, I don't know, either comments, and this is probably worth putting this, and I think it is, and Anya and others, I think it is ballot measure 110 that was passed maybe it's in the last couple of years ago, probably in 2019. And so I think it's not there's conversation, I think, around fixes and implementation. But it's, just to be clear, I think it was ballot measure 110. I see a few people shaking their heads. I will not pretend to be an expert on it, but I think it is ballot measure. Yeah, okay, thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, the other difficulty is pure timing. It was actually passed in the November election in 2020.
Thanks,
and the
Tim.
implementation took place on February 1st. And to all the law enforcement communities, very little quote unquote consultation. It was just like, here it is. And there are still problems being worked out. But anyway, it's something worth tracking.
Thanks, Danny. Another report out. We have a volunteer.
Yes, this is Major Lujan, OSP. So the things that we're focused on right now is obviously personnel, as I probably reported out last time. We're making some progress. I'm trying to get some recruits in recruit school. Excuse me. We have 24 that'll be starting recruit school in March, and then we're hoping that before the end of this biennium in June, to start another at least another 24. And I know that number sounds kind of arbitrary, but that's really the amount of folks that we can train at one time, given the COVID standards and regulations that are in place right now. But I have to give out a shout out to DPSST for working with us so well and closely on this, because I know that it's putting a lot of stress and pressure on many different agencies, and so we're doing the best that we can. But I think we're having a degree of success as we go forward. So that's really all I have.
Major Lujan, can I ask about in the 2020 and well throughout all time actually the diversification of our workforce? I mean, do we know how diverse that recruiting classes are?
So I don't have information at hand, but I can tell you that our focus in the recruiting and training side of the shop is under my direction. And our focus has been to number one, focus on the most qualified and looking at the diversity of the applicants that we're getting in. And some years back, and this is not something that just started, we've been working on this for a number of years now, as far back as probably 2014 and beyond, that we started trying to focus on diversifying our workforce to be reflective of the population that we police. And in doing so, we started engaging with a national testing center that gives us the ability to recruit from a broader pool of people. I know that there's several Oregon agencies that use that system now. But traditionally, OSP, and much like probably many Oregon law enforcement agencies, we always get the Oregon folks that want to be in policing, but by opening up the door a little broader, it also allows us to be able to recruit not only from other areas of the state, but other areas of the country. And whether it's our focus has been on colleges, and obviously military is always a good draw for law enforcement, just because of the diversity. They're one of the most diverse employers in the country. And so we want to be diverse enough to not only focus on one area of recruiting, but also higher education. And with the demands for police accountability, those things are important now and into the future. So that's kind of where our focus has been.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll keep the updates coming. Other tribes, tribal governments ready to give us a report?
I can give you an update on what's going on in Warm Springs as far as our public safety office is going. It's been a trying time because of the COVID and because of the restrictions, and we've had to basically tailor back our courts and our jails and the number of people that are taken into custody. Warm Springs is also suffering from the fact that we had to shut down our jail for a while because of issues, and that's not your business. It's between us and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but that's another story. And so we're having to transport our tribal prisoners all the way up to Norcor, which is in the Dalles. So that has caused kind of a strain, but we're able to manage through. Thankfully, I'm kind of proud of the Warm Springs community because everything's kind of remained stable and normal. But you know, it's getting to that point where people are just getting antsy from being contained in the houses all the time, and you have a pretty compact community, and so it's kind of harrowing to have the officers out there. When there's one breakout, it's normally a cluster, but we're just trying to deal with that situation as is. The vaccines have started on the reservation, which is helpful. A lot of my department has already been vaccinated through the Indian Health Service. So that's kind of moving us ahead and making sure the officers are safe while they're working out there, and we're better able to respond to the community because we don't have to worry about somebody being infected when we go out and make contact. But still adhering to all the policies with the PPE and full coverage, just so that there's that mutual responsibility going back and forth. Now, Warm Springs PD in itself is starting to move more toward a community policing mode. We've actually got one person that's assigned to be our community outreach officer, who is a tribal member, and she's very good. She's very motivated and is responsible for going out and making contacts with the community and making sure that we're aware of cultural events and to keep us updated on the concerns. We've also opened up as far as our information sharing goes. We've finally got our Facebook page as active and open, and we're posting as much as we possibly can so the public is aware of what's happening within the police department. Our relationships with Jefferson County, Wasco County, and the state police, I would say, are excellent. We're able to, and a lot of it has to do with SB 412, but that being said, we still have some issues right now, but we're trying to work those out because we still want the ability to enforce our own laws within our own jurisdiction. But that being said, as far as our crossover, as far as enforcing state law, it's almost seamless. So that's a good respect. The U.S. Attorney's Office has been very supportive and responsive to our federal needs, which is most of the felony case investigations. And Tim Simmons can probably better go into this subject, that they hired another assistant U.S. attorney to handle like Umatilla and some of the other case loads, because they only had 1 or 2 people up in Portland that were trying to pick up all the major cases, and it just started to get backlogged. So I know the U.S. Attorney's Office is trying to work on that backlog, that we're going to keep bugging them until it gets handled. Warm Springs has also been designated as one of the pilot programs for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People project. So again, we're working with Tim as far as developing that program here, and he would be the one that can better go into that. So other than that, I walked into being a chief of police about a year ago when there was fires, civil disobedience, plague, but all in all, I'm pretty happy to be here and have gotten a lot of support from the Warm Springs tribe. That's about it.
Thanks for that report, Chief. Appreciate it. And helpful to hear kind of the whole range of issues from COVID impacts into your community policing approach. So appreciate that. How about another report out or update from tribe?
Hi,
Go, Will.
Oh, this is Willa. Okay, this is Willa with the Klamath Tribes. I don't really have a big report because we don't currently have a public safety department. We're in the process of developing it, and we've been working on that for the past year. So we're getting pretty close. I would say probably within 6 months, we'll be looking to recruit for a chief of police. We recently acquired about I think it was about 1,400 acres of our former reservation land. So we're putting that into trust. So that's going to be a significant portion for us. A lot of our focus right now is on natural resources, on the fish and game, because of what's going on out in our forests. We are trying to patrol that with our conservation officer, but we're having a lot of the same problems that the other tribes are seeing with just like camping and different things that are the illegal activity, I guess, going on out there. So that's a pretty big thing for us. We're trying to work on our relationship with our county. We're in Klamath County, and there's kind of a, you know, we have some good rapport with them, but we also have some pushback, like with the county commissioners and our elected reps that are not big fans of the tribe. So we're working on trying to improve those relationships. And we are doing, we had one mass vaccine event yesterday. I think they did close to 200 vaccinations, and then we're going to have another one on the 9th, and they're planning on doing up to 1,000 vaccinations with that one. So we're also vaccinating non-tribal spouses and partners and all our tribal employees that choose to be vaccinated. So that's a pretty big deal for us. We're also just trying to mitigate the same thing with COVID and everything that's going on. So we're excited about our public safety department, and I appreciate hearing from Chief McKnight and Chief Elliott on how this new ballot measure is working, because I can definitely make that as a recommendation to, because you know we're still developing our ordinances and our laws that we're going to have, so that's something we'll have to take into consideration. So I don't really have a whole lot more. Thank you.
Thanks, Willa. Appreciate the report and comments. All right. I'll look to someone next. Who's willing to jump in there? Hey, Danny, I see you checking in.
Hey, Brian, just a suggestion here, while others may jump in. Tim Simmons is kind of like certainly an agency, but he's also, you know, working with the tribal nations in particular. Tim, I'm not sure if you were anticipating making any comments, but clearly your colleagues among the tribal nations have appreciated and counted on your services and that of the U.S. Attorney's Office. So, Tim, did you want to add anything at this time?
Thanks, Danny. I'd be glad to at least make some comments. As kind of indicated by Bill, we are in the process of trying to hire, and it's been an interesting time to hire, as everyone's aware of, with everything, and including a transition in administration. So that's been interesting, but we are in the process and have hired some new folks on board. And correct, we believe some of those folks will be working and assisting in Indian country issues. If people aren't aware, we do now have in place an MMIP coordinator that in the future, I'd be glad to have her come and present to the group on MMIP issues. We're doing quite a bit and trying to do more in the MMIP world. And with the passage of Savannah's Act, which requires some reporting requirements directly on the U.S. Attorney's Office, you'll be hearing from us a lot this year, and we'll be looking out to talk with the tribes. We will be issuing, hopefully within this month, an MMIP report that kind of lays out some of the things we're doing and some of the things we plan to do in MMIP. So you'll see more of that. And as indicated by Bill, we are proud to be working with the Warm Springs tribe on a pilot project to work through MMIP issues. And we are also looking forward to working with all the tribes on MMIP issues. So we look forward to that. I will say, and I'll take an additional look at the Senate Bill 110 that you all mentioned. And I do just want to remind folks that to the extent we're talking about drugs that are illegal under federal law, that is an issue that we can talk with tribes about more if it's becoming a significant issue. So although it may be legal under certain law, state law, to possess marijuana and meth and a variety of other things, if you're seeing that happen in Indian country, let's have a conversation about that, because it's still potentially a violation of federal law that we can work with tribes to see if we can assist. And since the federal laws are general applicable laws, be aware it's probably at that point, doesn't matter if you're PL 280 or non-PL 280, it's a general applicable law. If that becomes a significant issue, I think we'd be willing to work with folks on that to see if there's any assistance we can provide. And so those are just a couple quick updates on MMIP and other issues we're working on. And I look forward to talking about, I think there were some other issues on the agenda later that I'd look forward to providing comments on also down the road. So that'd be my update.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, and happy to keep it going. I'm not sure if we've got other tribal nations represented that we haven't heard from, maybe Siletz or Cow Creek, or again, I'm not. I didn't totally track who is on the call, but please jump in if we haven't heard from you yet. Maybe
this is Bud Lane from Siletz.
Great.
I don't have a huge report. We're dealing with, of course, the COVID epidemic, and have opened up our clinic to where we've done some vaccinations. We're still reeling from the fires, as a lot of tribes are, from last year, and the double whammy of trying to have some emergency shelters for families that were displaced by the fires just north of Lincoln City here in Siletz, and try to manage that during that during the COVID epidemic, which was a real challenge. And we've also started a housing project for displaced people who are still displaced with FEMA in Lincoln City. So that's going to be ongoing, even at this, what would seem like a late date. There's still, those effects from those fires are still affecting the local community around here. And but other than those major things, we don't have a lot to report out this way.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Bless you. I thought maybe a report was going to follow that, but maybe not.
So I guess I'll talk. I'm really new to this position. I'm still in the trainee stage. Just went through the harm reduction training, which was really good. And I'm actually doing a mindfulness training with some of our youth in Siletz. I'm working with the school district. So just kind of giving kids positive, healthy ways to deal with their feelings and emotions so they can avoid maladaptive ways of coping, which leads to anxiety, depression, maybe possible future drug use in the future. So that's all I got to report, really.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Can I say something real quick, Brian?
Of course.
Hi, Elizabeth. In my position as tribal liaison, I'd love to connect with you after the meeting and talk to you about, we've got some Siletz youth, but you work for Siletz, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with you and talk to you a little bit more about that if you've got some time.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, feel free at any point to jump in here. Making those connections, I think, is one of the key pieces of this, right? Though we're not in person, we get a chance to see each other, maybe in ways that we don't otherwise. So other updates or reports, I think we've heard from Grand Ronde, Warm Springs, Klamath, just heard a bit from Siletz, other tribal nations on the call that we're missing. Feel free to jump in, and don't want to belabor this if we don't have folks on the Zoom. We can move forward if needed. All right. Well, we are going to also spend some time toward the end hearing from other agencies that are represented. So for agencies that didn't, get an opportunity to kind of give an update, we'll spend a little more time on that here in a minute. But just since we're right around 2 o'clock, so we're doing just fine on time. But if there are other questions or comments based on what folks just heard, just don't hesitate to chime in, please. All right, Danny, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Brian. And there's so much from the conversations that I think we'll need to follow up with the cluster members on information and clarifying things. But at the 2 o'clock time frame, we're going to have my report on LCIS and Constantine's report from the governor's office. But let me just do a quick check-in to see if Constantine's available. I know he's got a crazy schedule, so I just want to take advantage of his availability. I'm not sure if Constantine is on yet. Okay, so let me proceed with the LCIS report. I think the things I wanted to mention are that my role is simply that as an interim. So we are looking for a new director. The search committee has accepted applications, has screened them. We'll be announcing next steps at the February 17th commission meeting. So that'll entail interviewing, selection, and onboarding a new director. From my viewpoint, not necessarily the search committees, the timeline is probably going to be a matter of months, a couple of more months at least. And I'm not going anywhere, so I mean, it's not a matter of how fast can they do this. But I just wanted to let you know that that's where we stand right now. And of course, the director will oversee a lot of the activities of all the clusters, including the public safety one. So I'm just excited to be involved with the public safety cluster again. So that said, besides the meeting on February 17th, which Kelly, I should note, will include a presentation by OLCC, and I can only imagine that cannabis will be part of that discussion as well to the commission members. So it'd be great, possibly as a future agenda item, as was anticipated before, if they have an OLCC presentation to this cluster. But again, that'll be one of the subject matters under discussion on February 17th. Another piece is a legislative update, and there's a wide range of pieces of legislation, obviously, that are before tribal nations and the commission. Some deal with water resource issues, a number of other things, but one of the things that's coming up is the clarification that as the state undertakes law enforcement reforms for its state, local, and city and county law enforcement entities, that those provisions aren't necessarily, are not imposed upon the sovereign nations and their law enforcement entities. I don't think it's, we'll talk a little bit about this in the discussion items, but that is certainly one of the bills that the commission and tribal nations are looking to well, I guess to focus on for passage this session. We don't see a huge amount of opposition to that, but just wanted to put that on people's radars. It's kind of interesting because other legislators continue to push for law enforcement reforms, and we'll see where those go. But they tend in their legislative drafts to include tribal nations, law enforcement entities in those, and it's just been part of our responsibility to go back to those legislators and clarify that the state does not have that kind of authority over sovereign nations. But anyway, that's the debate before the legislature. So that's another piece of the work that's going on. From a law enforcement standpoint, I need to point out, this will be part of our discussion as well on the later items, but increasingly tribal leaders are expressing interest, concerns about emergency management. Clearly COVID is part of that, but I think more from a historical standpoint, it's earthquake, it's tsunami, it's wildfires, those issues. As this cluster may recall, previously there was even discussions about setting up a separate emergency management cluster that did not take place for a number of, I think, sound reasons. But again, I think it's just one of those things that this cluster needs to be aware of. I did find when I got started as the interim that there is in fact a tribal emergency management coalition already stood up and working, and the contact person is Carrie Pong with Oregon Health Authority. So hopefully she may be able to join us for the later discussions. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out as well. So, and part of that emergency management also probably leads me to my last point, which is tribes are, after the wildfires in the past and certainly in last September, issues of fire suppression have come up. And it's part of my discussion memo, but basically it's that tribes feel like what they've declared or they've stated that they are simply not being notified or consulted with during some of these fire suppression activities that impact cultural sites, cultural resources, and those types of things, which have led to unfortunate, disastrous, sometimes disturbance and sometimes destruction of cultural resources. So anyway, that's another piece of the action that the commission is asked to look into. So we are glad to do that. But with that, I think I'll stop there and simply open it up to questions, and then certainly check in with to see if Constantine may be available for his comments too. So I see that he's joined us. So Constantine, if you don't mind, I just might ask for any questions to follow up my presentation, and then we'll turn to you. So any questions? Great. Constantine, I so much appreciate you taking time to join us today. And I know your schedule is kind of hectic, and to say the least, but it would be great for the cluster members to, as they get reestablished and moving forward as a cluster, to hear any insights you may have from the governor's office. And in particular, I think some things we're focusing on are legislative issues that may be facing tribes in the public safety sector. So Constantine, it's all yours.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad that these are up and running again. So really quickly, I am Constantine Severe. I'm the governor's public safety advisor. That means I State Patrol Superintendent a lot, as well as the other 6 or 7 public safety agencies at the state. So Department of Corrections, Oregon Youth Authority, Criminal Justice Commission, the Parole Board, and I also work with the Oregon Military Department and Office of Emergency Management. The other piece of my portfolio is, particularly during the legislative session, working the governor's priorities, the legislative priorities in the kind of public safety space. A big emphasis for the governor this session is really advancing the cause of racial justice and racial equity. And so she has her Racial Justice Council. There will be a number of bills related to criminal justice reform, as well as environmental justice, health equity, education. I'm trying to like run through all the different things I'm working on, but the other part of what we're working on, at least particularly in my portfolio, is even though it's rained in a good chunk of our state or have snow, is fire season, which is relatively speaking around the corner. Is being prepared for fire season. We had a pretty horrific fire season. One of my responsibilities is working with State Fire Marshal's office as well as Oregon Department of Forestry during wildfire season. And so there are a lot of tribes that were severely impacted by wildfire last year and in some previous, excuse me. While I see my role with this group as being able to be a liaison, and however I can be of service to you. The governor has a big and long-standing commitment to our tribal nations within the state of Oregon, and so really am honored to just be able to be part of the group and to learn from you. So however I can be of assistance, I am willing and able to serve.
Constantine, this is Danny. Just as an FYI from our discussion so far in the meeting, several people have presented a fact about ballot measure 110 and its implications and impacts on tribal nations and populations and their sovereign territories. I think it's my summary, and I think others can express this better. Just for your information, it's the issue of how tribal law enforcement, what authorities they have on enforcing their set of laws that may not be totally in conjunction with the state laws, especially for treaty tribes, where they have a situation there, and the relationship that those treaty tribes and other tribes have with the U.S. Attorney's Office in possible enforcement of those federal violations as far as federal laws go. So just wanted to put that on your radar as well. And others may want to chime in with their views or their questions.
Yeah, this is Chief McKnight from the Grand Ronde Tribal Police Department. Just a couple things I wanted to add on to that is basically is what we're running into is it's small amounts, it's user amounts of methamphetamines and heroin. And so it's, I understand, Tim is out there to help us with those and we could go federal, but there would be, 5 to 10 cases a day. And I know he's busy and they're busy. So our issue is that we're citing these people and they just come back and continue doing the same thing because the state's not holding them responsible for their actions. So I'm hoping that either the state looks at fixing that or they try to help fund tribes because these cases are, take 1 to 2 hours out of our day every day. And so we're constantly busy with that. So those are just a couple of the things I wanted to say about that. And also one other thing is we have a civil court and it's non-criminal. So we're not able to even cite our tribal members into our court right now. And so those are things that we need to look at in the future, is possibly being able to at least hold our tribal members accountable for small amounts of drug use. And then we can also talk to Tim and see exactly what kind of cases he would like to see, or ones that he would take.
Can I ask Chief McKnight a quick question?
Certainly.
Hey, Chief, this is Leslie. I was just wondering, how are you dealing with the juvenile cases, if you don't mind?
Currently, we haven't gotten a ton of juvenile cases with drug use, to be honest. We were having way more than normal calls for youth in our tribal housing during this COVID epidemic, but we put together a youth collaboration team, which was basically the police department, social services, and our school. And we really came together and tried to find creative ways to basically talk to our youth and get to our youth and try to figure out issues that they were having. Obviously, they're trapped in their homes all day. They're not going to school. They're not able to socialize like they were used to. So they were acting out. And so far, we've really reduced the calls when it comes to just acting out. We haven't had a ton of drug calls, though. I would say we had a couple alcohol calls, but no drugs so far, knock on wood.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Constantine or myself or others on the session? Great. Constantine, thanks again for your participation, and I'm sure we'll be staying in touch on a number of issues. I do want to add one other thing, because Karen Clevenger is from the Department of Justice, had to leave at 2 o'clock. There is a piece of legislation to provide full faith and credit to tribal court judgments by recognizing that by the state. I should have known by now, but I don't have firsthand knowledge as to how that's progressing through the session. So, but that's another piece of legislation impacting tribes and their tribal courts. So we'll see how far that bill gets. It seems to have a lot of support, but we'll see. Okay.
Good stuff.
Great.
Thanks, Constantine.
Okay. Thank you, Constantine. Let me move on into our next section here on the leadership of the cluster. As well as clusters are formulated, there's been the format of having a state agency co-chair and a tribal co-chair. As you may recall, Serena Stoudemire from YDD took that role on in 2018 and led the cluster through early last year. She's moved on now, and Brian has kindly stepped in and said, you know, he'd be glad to help reconvene this group. But Brian, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but basically that Brian is new to the state, new to the agency, new to government relationships, and a number of factors that he and I discussed that, you know, probably led us to think if there's others out there that might want to be the agency co-lead. The other aspect has been that tribal co-chairs we haven't had one in a number of years. And I think it'd be really good, obviously, to have the tribal co-chair leadership and input as to the cluster activities, agendas, those types of discussions take place. All that to say is I've had conversation with a couple of people, one from an agency, one from a tribe, who are maybe willing to fill these roles, but I also don't want to have others who are in the call not express their own interests. So I certainly would appreciate hearing from anybody else who may be interested in doing this, and then I can share with you at this stage that my discussions have been with Leslie Riggs with the OYA and Chief McKnight with the Grand Ronde Police Department. So, but again, I think they and I and all of us said, if others are interested, we would certainly want to hear from them. So if not, I will simply go on and explain how I see this possibly moving forward. Let me just do the campaign speaking part of this. Leslie, I known from not just OYA, but also his work on the education cluster where he was a co-chair, tribal co-chair. So he has the experience about how the cluster works and how to be a co-chair. So I think that's a big benefit. I think it also, obviously OYA is a big partner in all these activities, and he's done a masterful job of not just working with this cluster in OYA, but also in the Cultural Items Task Force from the governor's office and LCIS. And Chief McKnight has been instrumental in working on not just the Grand Ronde tribal issues, but has also been a resource, at least to me, on working on some artifacts, the procedures. So he's familiar with that. And he's got a relationship, obviously, not just with his own tribe, but with others to bringing ideas, tribal ideas, to the table, as you've heard earlier today. So short of hearing of others who may wish to express an interest, I would hope that somehow by acclamation we could accept these two people who have stepped forward and take them on as our co-chairs. So first I'll see if there's any questions, and then if we hear none or any other comments, we probably should let Leslie and Chief McKnight to offer their own comments. Okay, hearing none. Leslie, I'll pick on you first to just first to say thank you for your willingness to look at this position, and just wanted to offer you an opportunity to make any comments.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you for your that kind intro. I appreciate the what would you say, the confidence in me, I guess, in taking this role on. Without many of you without knowing me, I do have some background as the co-facilitator of the government-to-government education cluster meetings a few years ago when I was the division manager for the education programs at Grand Ronde, which is my tribe. And I do want to say that public safety and emergency management aren't necessarily my forte. So it will be an uphill learning curve for me. So I will ask for some patience in that. But I really appreciate, once again, your confidence, and I hope to do a great job in this role. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie. Chief McKnight, do you wish to make any comments?
Yeah, first off, thanks, Danny, for the kind words. I appreciate it. And thank you for this opportunity, and Major Luan for talking to you and having the faith in me to lead my tribe and talk to other tribes about issues that we can address and try to make them better. Just a little bit of history. About 10 years ago, my council came to me and asked me to start a police department. I had no background in that. And so far we've got 10 people hired on, and we're working 24/7, and I think a pretty successful police department. So I like taking on challenges, and I'm sure we will look at a lot of challenges here in this cluster meetings, and hopefully we'll find some good solutions that will help all tribes and the state of Oregon.
Thank you, Chief. Good night. Again, I'm hopeful that this meets with the concurrence of all the cluster members, and hearing no objection, I think we'll just go ahead and make it so, as they say. So just from a transition standpoint, I did talk to, obviously, Chief McKnight and Leslie Riggs about this. Brian and I are willing to help transition this into the next meeting, and then at that time assume the new leadership. In the meantime, our office at LCIS will do the minutes for this meeting, and Brian and I will get together with Leslie and Chief McKnight about how we can be of assistance to them. But basically, I think the assumption of those leadership roles would be at the next meeting. And that's obviously for this cluster group to decide when and where, I mean, when and how. That said, I certainly don't want to close everybody out if they had comments or questions. Hearing none, I think we have new leadership, and I'm so appreciative that we have these two leaders that will help us into I guess, kickstarting our organization back up for the public safety cluster. So thanks for that. Very much appreciated. With that, Brian, I'll throw it back to your part of the agenda.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Chief McKnight and Leslie Riggs for stepping up. That's appreciated, and we're excited from the Youth Development Division standpoint, like to continue our involvement, and it's also great to have Leslie, you as someone who's got some specific experience in a role that's youth related, right? So that as we think about public safety, we're not only thinking about adult, which we should be, and youth, and they're trying to prevent our youth from being those adults in the public safety system. So just appreciate that full perspective. So want to get to the next part of our agenda. I know maybe in some ways for folks, this is also kind of the heart of things in terms of what topics and issues should the cluster focus on and over the overcoming meetings. And Danny previewed some of this, I think, in his LCIS report, but I'm going to ask, I think at this point, for Melissa to share this discussion memo. And again, I think we've previewed some of these pieces, but and Danny, I don't know if there's a need, not that, and hope, again, we sent this out in advance, so folks hopefully had a chance to peek at it before. But there are, several issues that we could tackle, if you will, and converse about as a cluster, and want to make sure that we've got the right list of issues and topics, but also see if there are people who on the call today or folks you're aware of who might be important resources for some of these topics. And again, I know Danny's had, and others have probably had some offline conversations to figure out where somebody might want to provide some piece of information. If I'm not mistaken, I think I heard Kelly say that she's willing to provide some information on her piece. I took some notes on it. I can't remember now. I'm forgetting for a second what it was, but it was one of the topics in the minute. So just want to hit these topics. We've got, I don't know, a half hour or so to talk about the topics, and want to give folks the time and space to think about how we should approach these. Constantine spoke to this first one, summer wildfire suppression, relief, recovery. The season is sort of back upon all of us and tribal nations, and you know, what are the best ways for this cluster to engage around this topic? Danny, do you want to hit any of these points from your memo?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. I mentioned this in my update, but I think there's an opportunity here because the fire marshal's office is within the public safety cluster to have a conversation with them, but also if there's interest in this, is have them report out on some of these things about wildfire suppression and the concerns about cultural items and notification and the wide array of issues that are at play here. And if that takes place, I know colleagues at the Oregon Department of Forestry likewise would want to talk about how the state system basically operates that in a conflagration, the state resources are put to use by local entities, firefighting entities, and usually are led by local entities. And that has led to some confusion, or a lot of confusion actually, as to, you know, what role do tribes have in these fire fighting or these suppression issues. So all this is just teeing it up for if there's interest, we might be able to talk to the fire marshal's office and our colleagues at ODF. And I just highlighted it. If you want to see a great video about some of these fire suppression issues for tribes, watch the ODF video that's available. So that's, again, that's more food for thought as the cluster thinks about future discussion items.
Annie, this is Major Lujan. I was going to suggest is that if there's some interest in the wildland fire part of it and the conflagrations, I can be a resource for y'all to get some of the fire marshal folks to speak on that and maybe talk a little bit about the infrastructure and how the conflagrations are deployed and that, you know, kind of the nuts and bolts, if you will, to just kind of refresh everybody's memory. And then if there's any other concerns that maybe get the right people at the table that can talk about those things. And I can certainly ask the fire marshal to, and we've had them at this cluster before. So whatever y'all need, you know, I will try to facilitate that if that's an item of interest.
I think that sounds great. Thanks again, Major, for that work.
It seems timely, right? To have that information now or over the next month or two seems like it could make a major difference. Any comments or questions on that offer and just this topic generally?
Brian and Danny, this is Tim Simmons, and the one issue I would raise is I'm starting to look at, and this would probably fall in the category of post-fire activities. I think we're all aware of when these fires hit, they leave land exposed that typically hasn't been exposed in the past. And I know I'm getting reports of potential looting issues where people are now taking advantage of that. And so to the extent, you know, I'd like to get into some interactions with the tribes about sensitive areas that we think are exposed and coming up with a post-fire plan, especially on federal land, that we can do to protect those sites and potentially monitor them as they're exposed. So I'd be open to that conversation or participating if folks would find that worthwhile.
Tim, if I might connect you with Maida Lofgarden at OWEB, the Oregon Water Enhancement. Anyway, she's with OWEB.
Enhancement Board?
Yes.
Yeah.
And she leads the Natural and Cultural Resources Task Force as part of the disaster cabinet. And they're looking at all this displacement, recovery, relief, all those types of issues. But she's done a great job of inviting tribal leadership to the task force, but has also set up a tribal advisory work group, which will also undertake this whole issue of suppression issues, even though it's a, not necessarily a post-fire type of activity. But if I can check in with them and see if they're interested, might want to link you into their work as well. So
I'd be glad to connect with those folks if you think it'd be worthwhile.
that's great.
Great. Any other comments on fire suppression, relief, recovery / post-fire? All good stuff. Moving to the next topic, emergency management. Again, Danny, you spoke to a bit of this in your report out. Any additional words from you, Danny?
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned that it's a growing interest, concern by tribal leadership. And we had the good privilege of having emergency management come and talk to the commission. And that was extremely helpful. But that said, I think there still remains some tribal leadership that says, how do we work on this in a cluster format? And clearly, emergency management is in the public safety cluster. But I just raised for possible future discussions, having a presentation by the Oregon Tribal Emergency Preparedness Coalition, which is made up of obviously tribal emergency managers. But it's just food for thought. Somewhere down the line, it doesn't have to be the next meeting, but just something. And I'd be interested in hearing from our colleagues in emergency management about any of these matters or ideas.
Thanks, Danny.
This is Eric Rao, the Tribal Liaison for the Oregon Office of Emergency Management. I can speak to some of these issues, I think, briefly, if I may.
Certainly.
Thank you. I know that Director Phelps wants to have a moment as well, if he may. When he returns, he had to step away for another meeting, but I expect him back momentarily. So I may be interrupted by my own director here. But just briefly to offer a perspective, first of all, Oregon Office of Emergency Management, for those that are not familiar with us, we are a small civilian office within the Oregon Military Department. We have a director who works with Constantine in the governor's office and also works with the adjutant general as the head of the military department. I, as the tribal liaison, that's one duty among several for me. I have other responsibilities within the organization, but I also spend a lot of time talking to and working with tribal emergency managers. And I really appreciate that aspect of the work, and I'm grateful to be able to do that. The Tribal Emergency Preparedness Coalition that Director Santos described is a group that I participate in as well. Carrie Palm from the Oregon Health Authority, she's from the Health Security Preparedness and Response Division. So many of you may be familiar with Julie Johnson, who is the lead, or Michael Stickle, who are the lead tribal liaisons for OHA writ large. Carrie is the sort of specialized tribal liaison, and she's a fantastic advocate and a fantastic professional colleague. I appreciate working with her all the time. But we have, between she and I, unfortunately, she's a full-time tribal liaison and I'm a part-time, or fortunately, perhaps. So she's been able to spend a lot more time facilitating that group than I have. I'm just an attendee for the most part. But we have good participation from a majority of, if not all of the 9 tribes in Oregon. Those that have full-time emergency management programs are growing. Several tribes have added that in the last year or two. And I think others have their eyes on it as well. That's a fantastic group that previously met twice a year or quarterly. Now, since the events of the last year and a half have brought this to the forefront, that group has been meeting more like monthly or weekly sometimes. And it is a very functional group. It's a very collegial group. It gets a lot done. The members get a lot done, and there's a lot of good exchange happening there. So I think that it benefits everybody. The tribes have been able to send each other mutual aid in terms of personnel, in terms of equipment, by way of connections that have been made in those groups. And there's a very good and functional relationship there. One of the ways that I think OEM and perhaps myself as tribal liaison for OEM have been able to supplement that group is to smooth the way for relationships with county emergency managers. In some cases, the tribes have made those relationships on their own, and in other cases, they've asked us for assistance, and we've been able to make some introductions, to make some common ground on issues with county emergency managers where that didn't exist before. For the most part, I find state agencies are teaching me more than I'm teaching them. So I appreciate all my colleagues in state agencies, not only Carrie and Julie, but lots of folks from other state agencies. Director Santos mentioned Department of Forestry. I know Dave Lorenz has done a lot there, and a number of other folks have as well, and I appreciate that. So typically, we are able to share information back and forth with other state agencies in order to better assist the tribes. But I think that's the sort of thumbnail sketch of how things work. I should also say one more thing, and that is that the FEMA region that we reside in, so FEMA Region 10 is Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. FEMA Region 10 also accounts for half of all of the federally recognized tribes and Alaska Native villages in the US. And FEMA Region 10 has been a good partner in all of this. They have a strong tribal liaison staff themselves who do a good job sharing information with Carrie, sharing information with myself, and with tribal emergency managers. I'll take a breath and see if my director has joined or if anyone has questions, but hopefully that brief was helpful in some way.
Eric, it really was. I just want to, I guess, reiterate that while the wildfires were certainly one of the issues, it just continues to impress me that tribal leaderships talk about, especially the coastal tribes, about their great concerns about tsunamis, earthquakes, fires, those kinds of things. So it's a pretty broad range. And then you throw COVID and a pandemic and health concerns into it. It's a pretty big agenda item, and I appreciate all the work of OEM, and especially with the tribes and the tribal managers, the emergency managers. So I think there's something there we can look at possibly for the future discussion.
Thank you, sir. And if I may, I'd like to add one more item that I forgot, and that is that one of the most overburdened positions, I mentioned that I wear several hats, but there are lots of folks who have more than I do at OEM. And one of the most overburdened positions is our state hazard mitigation officer. That's a woman named Amy Bechant. And Amy has been participating in the natural resources work group, natural resources cluster, and cultural resources cluster. And I think she's been doing a good job making inroads there, meeting with tribal staff and addressing some of those issues through hazard mitigation as well. And the reason I think that's important is that we've been able to share information within OEM, but also amongst other agencies with the Natural and Cultural Resources Task Force for Fire Response and some other folks there. So there are a couple of lines of effort here, and sharing information amongst them while keeping them dedicated to their purpose is kind of our goal.
Great, thanks.
That's really helpful. And I guess, I mean, Danny, to your point, probably not to be totally decided today, but I mean, I think that this cluster, as the work goes on, should think about how to have focused, if you will, conversations around public safety, and then also some focused conversations around emergency preparedness, emergency management, we'll call it, and this new word to me, hazard mitigation, and whether, again, those maybe for the coming months and year, they can happen both within the cluster, but maybe there's a need. And to be clear here, I'm not advocating for like more clusters and more meetings, right? Because the last thing any of us needs. But you know, to ensure that those focused conversations are happening either within, you know, alternating agendas or alternating months, or maybe again it's another cluster. Again, not to overly compartmentalize, but sometimes you can't. You try to spread yourself so thin that then you're not really able to go deep on any particular thing, and so just would be something I think for participants on today's Zoom to just be thinking about and being mindful of as the work goes forward. I don't know, Eric or if the director, like if you have experience or thoughts or like ways in which that you can hold these issues and or other other people on the call, if there are quick thoughts on that, I'm sure it'd be helpful to have people think through.
Well, this is Eric from Oregon OEM again, and I'll just say that one thing that our director has said before and that we have presented to this group before, and that I think he spoke to the full commission last winter, and that is that we're happy to approach this in any way that the tribes and the commission decide that we should. Whether it's reporting through to this cluster on a recurring basis, or whether whatever it looks like, we'll certainly address that in that way. That government to government relationships are important, and we recognize the necessity of doing a good job with that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions or comments on emergency management? All right, I can't see people if they're raising their hands but I'm looking at the chat, so I don't see anything. Let's move to the topic of missing and murdered Native American women and Indigenous people. I think also more generally, as it was referred to earlier, if I heard one of the chief's comments, but again, I'll send it back to you, Danny. I know there was a police report in June of 2020, and so this seems like a topic that we can spend a little more time on. Thanks.
Yeah, Superintendent Davey, also Major Lujan and Lieutenant Wood, they've been very gracious about attending this session right now. I'll turn it over to the state police for their summarization of the report. It's a well-written report. There's a link there to the report itself, but Superintendent Davey, Major Lujan, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you. And again, my name is Terry, and I am the superintendent with State Police. And I had the honor of being the coordinator for the Missing and Murdered Native American Women work group that we put together in response to a bill that was passed in 2019 called House Bill 2625. And Representative Sanchez was the main sponsor for the bill and also participated on the work group. So the bill was passed during that legislative session, and then State Police, it directed us to do a study. And the study was focused on increasing and improving the reporting, the investigation, and the response to incidents involving missing and murdered Native American women. And I do want to say that the bill was passed directed towards Native American women, but the issue is much larger than just two women. It's young women, it's men, it's boys, it's a whole gamut. This is how this report and how the bill was designed. So our work group, we put it together to begin with, and it had a multidisciplinary approach. Law enforcement from state, federal, tribal. We had victims advocacy, we had state legislators, Representative Sanchez was on it, and members from different academia like Portland State University were part of the work group. We started doing what we called listening, understanding tours. Our goal was to reach as many of the tribal nations and urban population centers as possible. And that required a lot of outreach. And so I know that Lieutenant Wood was instrumental on working through that outreach. And also on this call is Tim Simmons, and Tim was part of our work group also. We were able to reach, before the COVID pandemic struck, we were able to hold, or I should say participate in 5 listening and understanding sessions. We began the first one in December of 2019, and the Confederate Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation hosted it, and it was very well attended. Then in January of 2020, we moved to the University of Oregon at the Many Nations Longhouse, and that was very well attended also by a variety of students and community members. But the interesting part of having it on the university campus was the amount of participants from other tribal nations, not here in Oregon, but we had Alaska there, and a couple other, California was also represented. Later in that month, we went to the Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs Indian Reservation, and that was by far the largest listening and understanding tour. It had a phenomenal attendance by community members. And then in February, we were able to host another one and participate at the Oregon State University Native American Longhouse. And that again had a variety of different individuals that came not only from the campus in Oregon tribal nations, but also there were members from tribal nations that are located outside of Oregon. We also were able to meet with members of the Burns Paiute Indian Reservation, and we did an in-person meeting with the tribal council and key leadership members of Klamath tribes. Unfortunately, the 5 listening and understanding sessions were held, and the one meeting with the tribal council of Klamath tribes, and then after that, all remaining were canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic and to ensure the safety of it all. We did have a legislative mandate. The report needed to be completed and submitted by September of 2020. So we used the information we had gleaned to date to craft that report that Ms. Danny Santos was talking about. And in that report, we did identify 4 recommendations, and there are many more items that could be chosen to be explored by a legislative member if they choose to. But that was just our way of saying there are 4 areas that could be implemented or explored that will help improve and the response and investigation when somebody comes up missing or is murdered that is Native American. And so that is what the report focused on, was the 4 recommendations that we sent forward. And once, I have not heard from legislatures yet since that report was submitted, as far as feedback from them on where their legislature would like to see this go next. So that's a brief summary of how it transpired and began, what we did as a work group unit in order to get opportunities with our Native American communities to be able to share what they have and the beliefs as what are some of the impediments and some of the issues at hand. And a lot of it was relationships between law enforcement and tribal communities. That was one of the key takeaways, is a lot of our tribal communities do not feel heard. And that goes from area of all over Oregon, is they don't feel respected and heard. And that's one thing that, as a member of the work group, I heard loud and clear that that is an area that must be improved.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Yeah.
I guess questions for the superintendent and colleagues. And Tim, I'm not sure if you wanted to chime in on murdered and missing Indigenous people work at the federal office. You've mentioned that your office has a special section on that. Now it may be worth exploring that with this subject as well.
This is Tim. I would just say I would commend Oregon State Police on, I think they did an excellent job of organizing that and trying to have, I think, a very difficult conversation with the tribal community. I know it was negatively impacted by COVID, but I thought they did an amazing job of starting that conversation. And I know we, the U.S. Attorney's Office, stand ready to assist or help with those recommendations made, because we agree those recommendations need to be addressed in the future. And as indicated previously, I won't go any more in depth into it. Our MMIP coordinator plans to release an action plan in the near future to kind of talk about what we hope to do with tribal communities and specifically with MMIP.
Thanks, Tim, about that. And Superintendent, I just have to echo that. A lot of work. I mean, there was a lot of work that went into this, and a lot of great information. Like you mentioned, we are having to wait to see what the legislative response will be. I have a check-in coming up with Representative Santos, so I'm sure this will be part of our discussions as well. But something for this cluster group just to keep in mind. And again, it's possibly a future subject matter especially in coordination or collaboration with the federal report that might be coming out as well. So great work.
Thank you. And I do have to defer that to Lieutenant Wood. He took it to heart. He was at every meeting and he was able to capture really the gist of all the information that was shared with us and put it in a format that was understandable and really spoke to some of the issues that we are experiencing and have been experiencing here in Oregon. So thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Brian, if you don't mind, I trying to be mindful of our time.
Yeah.
I may just go into NAGPRA.
Please. Yep.
Yeah. I hate cutting these conversations short, but it was just meant to be food for thought for future ideas. NAGPRA is basically just a reminder of our ongoing situations here about inadvertent discoveries of human remains, as well as cultural items. It remains among the highest priorities for the tribes, clearly for a number of good reasons. We've had great assistance from the state police and SHPO to do that, but I just wanted to remind this group that this is an issue, and if we want to have more discussions about how it works or issues that are taking place, we can certainly do that in the future. I have to confess that at times I find myself falling way behind on some of these issues, and it's given the high priority it is, I have to look myself in a mirror when I talk about this subject and say, to give it the proper importance that it does. But it's just more of a reminder of the act itself and procedures that the state has. I gave a link there to our website on these matters. So that said, I'd simply open it up to any questions or comments. Well, hearing none, this next subject is the Public Law 280, PL 280 trainings. I'm catching up to this subject, and I think Brian is as well. It was something that Serena worked very hard at trying to get trainings provided. And this was from the outcome of prior cluster meetings. Of course, the minutes of the December 2019 meeting talked about how these trainings had gone so far. But in my conversations with Serena, she led me to know that the people who were putting on the training apparently did not want to do them, apparently preferred to do them in person. And if that remains the case, it's going to be a while before that takes place. But nonetheless, there's, something this group can continue to talk about, those kinds of trainings. And I'm cognizant of the fact that there's certainly differences between PL 280s and non-280 tribes. So, but again, given that it was part of the agenda in December 2019, with the anticipation of moving forward with more training, a second round of training, I just wanted to put it on the table again. So I don't know where to go with it from there. Be glad to follow up as this group requests.
So Danny, Major Lujan, so I just wanted to kind of give a little background. The PL 280, I think that Chief McKnight and his agency in partnership with this group put on the training, and it's been great training. The other thing I would say that OSP with the Oregon Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney Tim Simmons, who's on the meeting, we've put jurisdictional training in the past, and what we've typically done is that we have presented in 3 different areas of the state or 4 different areas of the state to avoid the travel and all that. And ironically, just before COVID hit, we were planning on putting this training again, and it touches on PL 280, on non-PL 280 jurisdiction issues, in addition to the foreign protection orders, which was kind of becoming a hot topic. And you know, if there's still interest in that kind of training, you know, obviously I have to get together with our partners and try to decide, you know, is it feasible to do it, whether through you know, remote as we're doing with Zoom, or is there a possibility to do it in smaller groups? We've had really good fortune by utilizing facilities at the local level, whether it be a tribal facility or a local law enforcement facility. And again, it would have to be with, if the governor's orders are still in play for social distancing and COVID restrictions, we could still do that. You know, obviously it would take some work, but I'd be willing to try to facilitate that if there's interest in this group, and see we can dust off the presentations, have the new material, or any other topics that may be relevant to the public safety law enforcement arena, and the jurisdictional training and the issues and concerns that come from that.
Major, thank you so much for that. I think it's up obviously to the cluster groups and to decide about this. But I'm so appreciative of the background and previous efforts on training, and also for the future opportunities that might be there. Certainly the cluster group, new leadership can bring this back to the cluster for its consideration, but certainly want to give other folks to talk about if they have comments about this training.
Hey, Danny, this is Chief McKnight. Hey, just real quick, I think I think overall why this PL 280 was starting to be brought up back in the past, there was a big push from most of the chiefs and council members of trying to get some kind of educational piece in the DPSST, so everybody is learning it before they go and hit the streets. And so that was kind of the big picture. We decided that's going to take a lot of work, and I know the DPSST has, you know, it's hard to get in everything they have in the 16 weeks they have and all that. But one of our goals was possibly putting some sort of a PL 280 class on after hours. I know with the COVID that might not be possible now. But so if there is somebody that has neighboring jurisdictions with a tribal reservation, they could take that class so they could understand PL 280 better, kind of like what they do with some of the other trainings that they have at the DPSST. So I think in the future, I'd really like to try to do that. And we got to be real careful there. It's not going to be a class about each tribe. It's going to be a class about PL 280 and what it means, basically the black and white version of it. And that's what it is. We're not going to speak cultural stuff and all that type with other tribes, but just basically what PL 280 is and how it affects the people on the road.
Great. I think there's a lot of potential here.
I just have a quick comment. So I would definitely be interested in a PL 280 training or some sort of a course on it. I missed the last one last year. I was on travel status and wasn't able to be there. But I get a lot of questions in my role as tribal liaison as far as jurisdictions concerned, and I don't have the answers. And I know that those things are different across the 9 tribes in Oregon. They're all, the answers aren't all going to be the same, especially in regards to like Warm Springs, who isn't a PL 280 tribe. And not sure of Umatilla status on that, but yeah, so I definitely would benefit by some sort of training. Just throwing that out there.
That's great, Leslie.
What we gathered, since from YDD standpoint, just throw in, you know, from the the organization of the last training was that there was, I think, general excitement and interest in doing it again and again. Given that COVID hit and so on and so forth, it's not been possible to organize an in-person training. But from though I wasn't there, my sense was those that gathered really benefited. So whatever is decided at the cluster and however YDD can help, we're willing.
So Danny, one more thing. You know, more than likely, and as I said before, I haven't talked to our partners yet on this, but we try to do one of these presentations at least once a biennium that I spoke about earlier, and typically because our folks, you know, transition so much that we have to make sure that they stay abreast of this. And if we do another class, we typically open it to anybody that's willing to attend. So as we traverse down this path again, if we end up with a date and we're able to navigate all the hurdles that we currently have to with the COVID restrictions, I will make sure and present it to this body, or at least get it to the attention of Chief McKnight and Mr. Riggs. So.
Great.
Thank you.
Hey, Danny, it's Raymond Tessumpty again.
Share,
Yeah, we're going to pursue the non-280 or 280. I think it's going to involve the likes of Tim Simmons' office and state officials. You know, I think Tim will be in a better position in, I guess, interpreting what 280 represented back in 1953 and which we're still subject to, or the 280 tribes are subject to. Now, when we were talking Senate Bill 412, they were careful in trying to include Umatilla, which there was the state retroceded that authority to the tribe. And Burns was, I guess they reported to the superintendent here and then to the area. So it was assumption that they were also non-280. So, you know, this is my thinking. It goes back to Tim Simmons and reading through the 280, so everybody would have a clearer picture at the beginning and where we're at today, and trying to understand where we go from here on 280 tribes and non-280 tribes, and the state's role and the U.S.'s role. It's my comments.
Thanks, Chair Tessumpty. I appreciate those, and also I think it's wise counsel to say that we certainly need to look to Tim Simmons about some of the clarifications that he can provide on Public Law 280 and non-280 tribes and jurisdictions, those kinds of things. But we will hopefully be able to weave him into the conversations.
Great. I think we have this other topics piece, and we're just at the top of the hour, so we're doing fine on time. We can get to the agency updates here in just a second. I just noted under other topics, the ballot measure 110 implementation is something we want to be sure not to lose as a potential discussion. And then I think it was related to sort of marijuana regulation specifically that the OLCC brought up earlier, Kelly mentioned. So I just added that to that list, and we'll capture this in the notes, but just want to make sure I am getting that right, and if there are other topics. And Kelly, I see you popped in, so your topic's on the list. You don't need to go deep into it now, but I think I captured it as a potential.
Oh yeah, it was something that Serena had asked about, because I think I had provided an update on our cannabis regulation. It remains a topic of interest. So I'm happy to provide any updates if people would find that useful at some point in the future. There's certainly lots to talk about.
Well, and maybe too, as we get to agency updates here in a minute, Kelly, you can like hit some of the high points, I suppose, because there may be some critical information in that regard, but then maybe there's also a need to go deeper. I will not pretend to know if it can be encapsulated in a short update, but maybe it's just a little teaser, and then we can go deeper, because I can imagine there some big questions for folks. So are there any other topics that we want to capture on our list?
This is Anita Jackson from Warm Springs.
Hi, Anita, go ahead.
There's a topic on here that I was surprised isn't on the list, and that is with police reform. And, you know, we have some issues on our own reservations about our committees and our own police departments. But there's also the bigger issue of, you know, when we don't stay on our reservations all the time, and we go to Portland or we go to Eugene or, you know, other places. And because we are not white, and we obviously don't look, most of us don't look like we're white, we are treated the same way as a lot of Latinos, a lot of African Americans, and some good examples that a lot of people here bring up are the Standing Rock Sioux protest, or the water defense. We also had that issue in Burns a few years ago where those so-called patriots took over the Bureau of Land Management office, and they destroyed some of the Burns cultural items. And, you know, nothing happened to them. And in our eyes, nothing happened to them. But if that had been Indians, like at Standing Rock, they were shot with those water hoses and water cannons, and, you know, really roughed up, just like people during the protests this summer. So I think that's something that this group needs to address. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. I've added it to the list. Appreciate that comment and that input. You know, and maybe consistent with Constantine's point earlier about the governor's commitment and work around racial justice. I can only speak personally. I know that that's something that I'm finding is critical in the work we're doing with young people, and there's a call for system change and system transformation that we're hearing at a number of levels. So thanks, Anita. Other comments or questions on that?
Well, toward that end, there is kind of a lack of, I guess, training put forth in DPSST as to this issue. I mean, when you talk about training for PL 280 vis-a-vis federal, state, I mean, that's a perfect place in which to give the training, because it's not only going to our officers, but it's going to the state officers that are in the jurisdictions that are adjacent to the reservations. So not only could you address the issue of PL 280 in federal jurisdiction to the people that it's most pertinent to, but then you could also add in the cultural sensitivity issue of it all. And that's a big concern that we have right now, is it's just an education process as to, you know, how to interact with a Native American during a vehicle stop or during a disorderly conduct or those type of issues. And that's what DPSST is for.
Appreciate that, Chief. Other comments or additions? All right, well, we will, I know that Adrian is capturing some notes and minutes. I've captured some notes on this conversation as well. So there's not a shortage of things to talk about, as yet all probably not surprised by. But just to appreciate that there's some energy here and lots of ground to cover. So I'm gonna move us forward. It's a little bit after 3. We want to get to agency updates. So Danny, I think you were going to facilitate this part, and we might have heard a little bits and pieces from some folks, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I think we just, much like the tribal updates, we just wanted to give agencies an opportunity to give us an update or the highlights of what their activities might be related to tribal relations, government to government relationships. So I'm going to take the liberty of just going down again. Some of these agencies may still not be on the line, but I don't want to pass them over. So let me start with the Department of Corrections. Hearing none. Superintendent Davey or Major Lujan, any additional updates from the state police?
No, thank you for the opportunity, but there really is, we're just working in the legislative session and watching all the bills that come through.
Great, thank you. Eric or Director Phelps, Emergency Management?
I don't know if Director Phelps is still on. This is Eric. He was briefly loitering and then may have departed again. So the only other update I wanted to offer for OEM, something that I neglected earlier, and that is that I spoke about improving relationships between county emergency managers and tribal emergency managers where the tribes have asked us to do so. And that is to say that we have hired some and are in the process of hiring more regional coordinators. That's a position OEM's been trying to fill for quite a while. And right now we have one regional coordinator in Southwestern Oregon, one in Northwestern Oregon, one in Central Oregon, who's also covering the Eastern Oregon, the eastern part of the state, and one in the Central Willamette Valley, and then another one in the metro area. We're looking to hire additional coordinators in each of those regions, such that those folks could focus their efforts sort of in the way that I described Amy Bichant and myself as focusing our efforts in different phases of the disaster. But if folks have questions about those, or if other state agencies or tribes would like to know more about a particular area, please let me know. I'm happy to fill you in about that. Other than that, I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you for all your work with the tribes. I'm going to go to Kelly at OLCC.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, so a few updates. The OLCC has been really busy the past year because, as you know, bars and restaurants have been really impacted by COVID. So we've spent a lot of the last several months trying to provide relief in any way that we can, and I'll get to that in a second. We are also heavily involved in the legislative session. Just a couple items of legislation that are currently pending of note. So we currently are called the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, but there is actually pending legislation to change our name to the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission to more accurately reflect the work that we do. So we'll see if that passes. So we'll still be the OLCC, just a couple words in there changed. There is another House bill that is going through that does reference tribes, but it is really just a codification of our existing agreements that we have with tribes and the places that sell alcohol for on-premises consumption. So that legislation will codify the fact that we negotiate the prices of distilled spirits at a certain rate. So we'll continue to honor that long-standing tradition, and that we'd actually proposed that at the last session, but that session ended early, so we couldn't get to it, but there was widespread support from the tribes, and we did consult with tribes on that issue. As far as, sort of COVID relief and dealing with that, we've had to, we've tried to fast track, licenses to sell alcohol to go, because a lot of businesses couldn't have, sort of in-person dining. And recently, I think in the third special session of 2020, you may have seen this in the news, there's now the ability for restaurants that sell distilled spirits to sell those to go. Cocktails to go was not previously allowed under our laws. So that was kind of a big deal. We've implemented rules on that. So that's taken up a lot of our time. But also in addition to trying to help bars and restaurants get through sort of the COVID issues, we have had to take enforcement action against some premises that are not complying with the governor's executive orders and OHA guidance. We did pass rules requiring our licensees, people that we regulate, to comply with governor's executive orders and OHA guidance, like wearing masks, physical distancing, honoring the closure times. And we have had to take enforcement action against a number of bars and restaurants. I think almost 20 notices of violation. We have had to immediately suspend 8 premises. That's like stopping their liquor licenses like right away, just because what they were doing posed a serious danger to public health and safety. And we've been coordinating with Oregon Health Authority, OSHA, and the lottery. We have frequent sort of coordination calls, because we all sort of have a different piece with these businesses. The workplace safety, health safety, we regulate the liquor licenses, lottery does the video lottery terminals. So pretty busy there on the liquor front. On the cannabis side, not a lot of, not really affected by COVID. They were sort of deemed a business that could, the retail could stay open during COVID. And so that, and there's, you've probably seen in the news, very high sales of cannabis during COVID. And so, that seems to plod along, and I'm sure I can have, I can answer any questions about cannabis. It's a sort of a big issue, but, we continue to tweak our regulations. And I guess for those of you that are new or have not been part of this, so we regulate this, basically the cultivation, the processing, the retail sale of cannabis, on state land. There is a statute that does allow for tribes to negotiate with the governor's office for a compact, for, cannabis cultivation or processing on tribal land. So we do provide input into those compacts, but they are negotiated with the governor's office. And as of now, there are 2 agreements that have been signed, but no actual, nothing's, gotten off the ground at this point. So that was a lot of information all at once. Happy to answer any questions. And I do have to jump to another call at 3:30. So.
Questions? Thanks, Kelly. And we look forward to also see presentation on the 17th to the commission. So.
Yes, and I think that's a presentation on our warehouse expansion, or was
Yes.
it? Oh yeah, interesting stuff. Thank you.
I don't think we have anybody. Well, no, we do have somebody from DPSST. Maybe
Hi,
not.
and thank you for allowing me to respond. A couple things. First, like every other state agency, we're tracking all of the new legislative bills and kind of see what that impact's going to be on us. But moving forward, the academy is open and we are pushing classes through. I've taken a couple notes here specifically to the issues on 280 and some of the lack of cultural awareness training specific to addressing tribal members, whether when they're out and about in the state of Oregon with agencies. I can't really tell you what the decision will be on expanding our cultural diversity training, but one of the things I'd like to point out or add as a shout out, as the regional training manager, my responsibility is working with a group of people to provide training throughout the state and not necessarily focused on the basic academy here. And we're always looking at developing partnerships. And on some of these specific issues, if we can kind of develop a partnership or find ways that we can take smaller bites at this apple to address this issue and build on that, we're open to those conversations to see what we can do to present those throughout the state. And not necessarily during the basic academy, but going back out and offering this training at various parts throughout the state. We have 4 regional coordinators that do work on this work with agencies and departments throughout the state. And then I have 1 statewide coordinator on traffic safety. And also, kind of as a shout out, just real quickly, we are partnering with the Cow Creek tribe in May, and we don't have it advertised yet, but we'll be bringing in a national speaker, and they're going to be doing a 6-day, 3 different segments. So kind of registering for different parts at what suits you best on every officer as a leader. And it's going to be down there at 7 Feathers. And so it's kind of one of the things that we've been really trying to work on is expanding our reach as far as developing those partnerships and being able to find different ways to get higher level training out into the state outside of just having it here in Salem at the academy, but finding those locations that we can take it and present it out there. And this is one of those that's going to be at no cost, free to everybody to attend. And that's one of our goals, is trying to bring training out there that doesn't cost anything. We don't charge for what we do. And for all the departments out there, for all the law enforcement departments, if you weren't aware of what we do for regional training, please, you can always reach out and contact us. Our information is on the website, and we'll be more than happy to expand that. We've been trying to expand it over the last couple of years. Unfortunately, the last year in 2020 really kind of slowed that process down. So we're trying to make those improvements. But anyway, open to any questions, and thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Any questions?
Yeah, this is Raymond DeSumpty, Warm Springs. Thinking back, when I graduated January 1969 from the academy, I remember signing a piece of document, and I believe they call that the Criminal Code of Ethics. I don't know if you guys still do that or not.
Yes, we do.
Well, you do. Well, I think it'll make it a little bit easier in trying to develop some kind of police reform if they remember what they signed. They took the oath to that ethics. But that's my comment.
It's a great point, sir. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
OYA, Leslie, you want to take a lead there?
Sure, thank you, Danny. I can share a little bit. So first, I'll share a little bit of demographic information. At the moment, we have in our care 108 youth that identify as Native American, and so of those, 22 are from Oregon tribes. So that means the remaining portion of those youth are affiliated or enrolled with other tribes in the United States. Some of the other things that I just want to talk a little bit about, some of the things that Derwin and I have been doing in order to provide services to those youth. We're all dealing with this pandemic, and one of the main things that we wanted to ensure was that that the services that we do provide and the cultural programs that we do provide didn't go away. So in all actuality, instead of there being a lapse in those services, we've actually improved on them in some cases. Where we weren't getting out to some facilities weren't getting as many programs and services as they should. Derwin and I got together and we started making sure that we were getting out to those. So places like Burns, the Eastern Oregon Youth Correctional Facility, they weren't really getting a whole lot of services in that. So Derwin and I went out there a couple of months back and took the mother drum out there and sat in with the guys and taught them a couple of songs and taught them a couple of dances and played this hoop game that Derwin brought along with him. So we're making sure we're getting over to Oak Creek and young women's transitional program as well to visit with the girls as often as we can. We're going out there at least once a week. We switch because we're not able, because of COVID at the moment, we're not able to mix the the units, we have to do them unit by unit. So so our groups are smaller, but we're still, you know, like I said, we just want to make sure that we're maintaining those services as best as we can. Agency-wide, I know that Joe's been very busy with the legislative session and dealing with all of that. And one of the main focuses of the agency right now, it's been alluded to a few times, different times here, is racial justice. And so our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative is something that is permeating every aspect of the agency. And we're dealing with, you know, the racial injustices and the disproportionate representation of people of color within our facilities and in our community programs. And so that's something on our minds, as well as diversifying our workforce and our staff. So we're working very hard toward those ends. Another thing that's been happening is that's dealing with the racial injustice situation is the members of the OER team, the Office of Inclusion and Intercultural Relations, have been visiting facilities and having conversations with the youth and staff around this situation. So, and from what I'm hearing, unfortunately, I haven't been able to be involved in any of those personally, but from what I'm hearing, those are going very well. And so I just, at this point, since Derwin is here, I'd like to open it up for him if he'd like to say anything. But other than that, that's all I had to. Derwin?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Yeah, I was going to briefly touch on a committee that was developed. It's called the DEI, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Steering Committee. And it's made up of a mix of staff from all of the facilities and staff from the central office there in Salem. So anyway, what they've done is they've got these the steering committee. Then they have committees under that and subcommittees, and they've gone through all of the facilities, held group sessions, breakout sessions with the youth from all of the different units, one at a time, and they covered all of the facilities, and they're getting feedback from how safe the youth feel, the youth of color feel, what is it that's what is the barrier to them feeling safe, and then they broke out sessions with the staff and had sessions with the staff, and so all of this information is going to the steering committee, which eventually will be presented to the governor's office, representing Oregon Youth Authority, and what things they believe would help, like Leslie was saying, having more staff, native staff hired, or what have you, to help break down those barriers, the over-representation, like Leslie was saying, for Native youth, the Black youth and the Hispanic youth. So yeah, it's a huge undertaking. There's been some pushback from some of the staff from the different facilities, but the way I saw it presented, it was done in a way that was very respectful. But once you get emotions going, things can go sideways real quick. But anyway, yeah, it's a pretty intensive committee they've put together.
Thanks, Derwin.
Thanks, Derwin. Did anyone have any questions at all? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Brian, I turn this over to you for the YDD update.
Appreciate that, Danny. I'm going to turn it over primarily to Anya Sakino, who's our juvenile crime prevention manager I'll say real quickly, we're working, as you might imagine, a lot on legislative priorities and making sure that we're aware of bills that affect youth across the state and in our tribal nations. So we're focused a lot on that, as you might imagine, over the last few weeks. And a couple of things that are important to us in the legislative session. One is around a big re-engagement system, which is a system we've been charged with developing to connect youth who've become disconnected from education, right? They've either been pushed out or they've been expelled or just not felt like the educational system is serving them well, but we want to find ways to reconnect them to schools so that they don't head down a juvenile justice path. So want to again reconnect them with schools or GED and or career pathways. So we've got dollars that we're putting out into communities and also tribal nations this biennium. Literally right now, we've got $4 million in re-engagement dollars that are being deployed. And then in the next biennium, we're hoping to get another $8.3 million in re-engagement money as a part of the Student Success Act and funded through the corporate activities tax to support re-engagement efforts. So that's a big priority for us. Have a couple of other technical bills that we're working on as well. But Anya, I'll turn it over to you to talk a bit about our juvenile crime prevention work with tribes and counties.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. I just would like to continue the conversation that my colleague from OYA started around racial and ethnic disparities in the juvenile justice system, because that's a big area of the YDC and YDD's work. And OYA is a portion of the juvenile justice system. We're looking at disparities from the first point of contact, which would be an connection with the law enforcement officials or any other entity that would bring kids to the attention of juvenile departments across the state. And tribal youth would be no exception in that. So we have a position of a racial and ethnic disparities coordinator whose job is really to monitor disparities at every point of contact within the system. And of course, we're monitoring disparities for Native American youth, and we're seeing some areas both geographically and statewide where youth at the tribal and Native American youth get referred to the juvenile justice system at higher rates than other groups of population. So that's one, and we're working with OYA as well as the juvenile department directors to look at the juvenile justice system. And as for the tribes, we have intergovernmental agreements with each one of the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon to work with youth on providing prevention services within communities. And I believe Elizabeth might still be on the phone with us. So Elizabeth is the new coordinator in Siletz.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hi.
Hello.
We haven't met in person yet, but we've been pen pals for a little bit. So welcome. And each tribe has a prevention team that will look more or less.
Mm-hmm.
I almost said the same, but now come to think about, no. Each tribe will have their own thing. And I think it's, I don't know if we still have Warm Springs. Warm Springs was sort of the pioneer, if you will, of building up prevention efforts in their community, followed by all others. We've been working with each of the tribes to see how we can help them adjust their services delivery, because I started out saying that we have intergovernmental agreements which are based on tribal prevention plans, which had to be adjusted due to COVID-19, because in-person interaction with kids were pretty much impossible in some areas. Anyway, so that's an ongoing process, and we're currently assisting tribes in developing their juvenile crime prevention plans for the next biennium. Hi, Elizabeth. Now I see your face.
Hello, nice to see my face.
So yeah, the work never stops, and I don't know, of course, how long we will be in the current circumstances, meaning with limited interactions. And of course, it's really painful for the kids, for their parents, for their communities, and I don't know. I wish I knew some kind of predictive. I wish OY is really good at your predictive analytics. So, what's the prediction for the COVID, guys? Anyway, on our part, we'll just do the best we can to support local efforts. And I think that's pretty much all I have. So unless, Brian, you have something else to add, or Elizabeth.
Well, right now, I mean, our kids are zoomed out probably, but most of the activities we're doing via Zoom. We have a youth services meetup with people from our education department, people from behavioral health in different areas of the tribe. And we have like things like we have a game night. We have that we're doing on Zoom, of course. We have a reading team so that we got the kids involved in reading different books and then talking about the book that they read, which is something I'm doing tonight, matter of fact. You know, we want to get the kids out, you know, in the camping and the trips again and the river raft trips and all this. I mean, we put emphasis on culture equals prevention. So getting the kids involved in a lot of the cultural activities. Every week we do the Native American drum class. So I have one of my colleagues who joins with a couple other people to do drumming, and you know the kids are welcome to participate in that, but it's all on Zoom. But I mean, we just try to do our best with, you know, the COVID situation, but there are concerns, you know, just how kids are faring with all this going on. But we try to do our best to keep the kids engaged and stuff, even though, you know, we have to social distance and we have to, you know, do things on Zoom mostly. I did hear something last week about getting the kids involved in doing a mural in our town, and you know, like stuff to do with prevention and suicide. So like it'd be like one adult maybe with some small groups, and then making sure there's still social distancing and creating that mural. But so that's kind of where we're going. And then I created, like I was talking about before, the Mindfulness Monday, and so I'm going to be doing it with the tribe on the 15th of this month, and just kind of see who shows up. I've got different people putting it in their Facebook and our newsletter that we're doing this. And yesterday I did it with the Siletz Valley School kids, the middle schoolers, and then I just talked to somebody who's at Taft High School about doing it with the Taft High School kids. So I'm hoping to get that going for some of the tribal kids too. So that's what we got going on here.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
I think that we're done. Danny, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that covers the agency updates, unless there's somebody who wanted to add any additional comments or make comments. Hearing none, I'll turn it over to Brian as we talk about future meetings.
Yeah, and we're kind of getting on the close end here, toward the end, and I see we've about half the participants that we had when we started. So I just appreciate folks hanging on and want to figure out what the what our meeting schedule of this cluster should look like, and it, again, we may not totally figure it out today. Want to obviously respect the co-chairs and the kind of schedule, but probably be good to try to get a another date or set of dates on the radar. And so maybe the question is, you know, not to drill it deep into all the details and weeds, but is it, you know, do folks want to get together, you know, like in the coming month or two, or should we go sort of more quarterly and get, you know, a meeting, say 3-4 months down the line? Is there a direction folks are interested in, you know, sooner rather than later, or a little bit later?
Hey, Brian, just from a LCIS standpoint, I shared this with Brian and I shared this with Leslie. I'm not sure I shared it with Chief McKnight. It's a wide gambit of cluster meeting opportunities. Some meet monthly, some meet every other month, but for the most part, they tend to be quarterly or 4 meetings a year. That's not anywhere in stone or anything like that. But I think each cluster group has to decide, you know, how frequently does it want to meet, and obviously set up its own dates. And like Brian, I don't want to interfere with the co-chairs, the new co-chairs planning about this, but it could be something as simple as trying to figure out, not as simple, but a process of doodle polls or what have you about frequency, and then trying to pick a date out. I like everybody else, it's always great to have a time certain at some point,
yes,
so people can schedule it out on their calendars. So anyway, that's just my thought. Those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Danny. Other thoughts or comments on this, on the frequency?
Yeah, this is Chief McKnight. I think quarterly would be fine. Obviously, you guys can email me anytime or call me, and we could talk about any issues that are coming up, so we can get some kind of email chain going, so we can keep these things alive instead of forgetting about them for 3 months and then bringing them back up. But that's totally up to Leslie. Also, I'm open for anything.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. I'm good with quarterly. I think that's good. It's monthly. I think it'd be kind of a little bit heavy to try and maintain that. But quarterly is good because we can maintain momentum on things. And so, yeah, as long as folks are good with that, I think it's a good way to go.
Thanks to our co-chairs. Any other comments? And I appreciate folks are dropping emails into the chat. So obviously we're recording this, so we'll be able to capture those. But for Adrian or maybe even Melissa, definitely if you can get those into the notes somewhere, that'd be, or the minutes, that'd be great. Because my guess is these are some new email addresses that we may not have had. As folks may have gotten the invitation forwarded or whatnot. So we'll capture those. Sounds generally like a quarterly meeting makes sense. That's kind of, I mean, I heard that from the co-chairs, didn't hear any objections to that. That would put us in, you know, about 3-4 months from now. So if my calendar serves me right, we're talking like May, June or something. So that feels like we can probably work with that, and then either get together with the co-chairs on a call, or, you know, Danny, you and I, maybe the 4 to 6 of us can just put our heads together and try to come up with a few dates. But my sense is if we get the date determined, to Danny's point, get it certain so that people can start to plan ahead around it, then we'll go from there. So that feels good to me on that. I think the last piece is, unless there's any other comments, Danny, anything from you on the meeting?
No, I think that's a great, I mean, first and foremost, from LCIS, appreciate everybody's attendance and participation. I just have to tell you, it's probably the bureaucrat in me, but I got excited about the fact that just kickstarting this again. So thank you for not just what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but for your willingness to participate in the cluster. So I think good things are ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah. I just second everything you just said, Danny, and I know maybe I'll leave it with you if you want to close this out and adjourn us, unless there are other comments or questions, and maybe we can close with a prayer too. So appreciate everybody. Danny?
Appreciate it. Major Lujan, I don't know if you're still on the line, but may I call on you again just to close this out?
Absolutely, Danny. Heavenly Father, as we come to the end of our time together, we thank you for what has been accomplished here today. May the matters discussed serve as the catalyst to move us forward and cause us to advance and see growth in all the areas of our lives. May we leave here with recognizing you are the God of all wisdom and you are willing to lead us forward. This we pray in your name, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Well, again, so appreciate all your participation. We will work with the new co-chairs about planning the next meeting and get out some meeting follow-ups as well to share with the co-chairs and the cluster meetings members. So don't be shy and feel free to let us know questions, research you might want to get done. But all in all, thank you so much for a very productive cluster meeting today. So I think with that, we're adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good to see y'all.